This video is now in session, and Texas is going to gain 2 House seats, which means that Republicans now get to control 2 additional House seats, and they have the ability to gerrymander Texas's 38 congressional districts. And currently speaking, Texas's congressional districts are already pretty gerrymandered. We see right here that Democrats only have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, around 12 seats. It may be a little bit more or less, 13 seats, around 13 seats. And that may sound like a lot of seats except when you compare it over to the Republican side, they have around 20 seats, or to be more exact, 23 seats, I believe. And 23 seats is a big contrast to 13 seats when you look at the presidential election in 2020 when Joe Biden lost, or when Donald Trump won it by just 52.1%, and the Democrats lost by 46.5%. So with that election, comparing it to this, it shows that Texas is already gerrymandered, but Republicans can do even more with these 2 additional congressional districts. The first thing that Texas will definitely try to do is they're going to try to remove a lot of these competitive seats that have gone for Democrats. Seats like Texas's 15th district, potentially even Texas's 28th district. And what they're trying to do is they're going to try to pack these Democrats who represent these districts into one district. And from there, they'll use the other 2 districts to try to then make it more Republican. The other thing they're going to try to do is they're going to pack Austin. So Austin currently is split by multiple congressional districts. You see here Texas's 35th district, Texas's 25th, and then 21st, and then you see here 10th district, 17th district, and 35th district. So that is 5 districts that split up Austin, and that in the short term is okay for Republicans, but in the long term it is really bad for Republicans because Austin is growing at a very rapid pace, and you can see that these margins are getting closer and closer and closer. So if Republicans keep these margins, or if Republicans keep these congressional district layouts and split Austin into several different districts, in 10 years, it can very well occur that Austin gets big enough to the point where Democrats in Austin can flip every single one of these districts, which would then mean that Austin flips 5 Democratic districts, and that's a very big shift for Democrats, which is why that Texas Republicans are most likely going to pack Austin into one district to have all the Democratic voters have one district, and that would mean that Democrats would gain one district, but it would also mean that Democrats would not be able to get any of these other 4 districts in future elections. So that would be one gain for Democrats. The other thing that Republicans will try to do is they'll try to make Lizzie Fletcher's seat more Republican friendly. You can see here that it goes through the suburbs of Houston and then to the rural parts of Harris County. So what they're going to try to do is they're going to have Dan Crenshaw, the representative from Texas's 2nd district, take more of these Democratic votes, and then make Lizzie Fletcher go a little bit more out to Republican-friendly territory. And that would mean that she would most likely lose her re-election campaign, because in the 2020 election, she won by 50.8%. Now, if we go over to Dallas in that area, we can see here that the 24th district was won by Beth Van Duyn, but by a very narrow margin, around 1%, to be more exact, 1.3%. So what Texas Republicans will do is they're going to try to make that go more into Denton County and more into the rural parts of Collin County. And if they're able to get both of those counties, then Texas's 24th district can be a little more Republican. In exchange, the Texas's 26th district will gain a little bit more of the Dallas-Fort Worth suburbs in order to counteract the expansion that Beth Van Duyn will have going more into northern Texas. Republicans will also definitely try to target Colin Allred seats in Texas's 32nd district when he won it against Pete Sessions in the 2018 election, and they'll do that by going again more out to Republican territory, allowing Republicans to flip multiple seats in Texas. And it's essentially Republicans Republicans' last stand in Texas, since Texas is becoming more and more Democratic. Now, in the short term, it's very well expected that that Republicans can make gains in Texas through the Rio Grande Valley and as well as through the suburbs. But in the long term, Democrats are coming in droves into Texas, with the numbers going way too large for Republicans to counteract. There are a lot of people moving over to Texas from California and New York, the two of the most Democratic states in the nation. And with Democrats coming over to Texas, it's only a matter of time till Texas flips. Now, some people may argue that this is kind of the same pandering that Democrats had in Florida when people started moving over to Florida, and as a result, there were expectations that Florida would become a lean or likely Democratic state. Except the difference between Texas and Florida is that there are a lot of immigrants from Florida who come from South American nations, and as well as not Central, as well as Caribbean nations, and those individuals are more likely to be conservative. Again, demographics is not always the destiny to the Democratic Party. Meanwhile, for Texas, what we're seeing is an influx of Mexican Americans, and even though Venezuelan Americans or Brazilian Americans or Puerto Rican Americans might be willing to vote for the Republican Party, the Mexican Americans are much less likely to vote for the Republican Party, and that's how we saw a flip in Arizona, even though Joe Biden was not able to flip in Florida. In addition, you have a lot of college-educated white workers, white-collar workers from California and New York who typically vote Democratic, moving over to Texas in a very large number that's not comparable to the move to Florida. So with Texas becoming more of a state for Democratic interest and a state that's becoming more economically friendly for white-collar workers, we'll see Texas become more and more Democratic, and that will ultimately lead Democrats to having a majority in the Texas State House and in the State Senate. They're not that far off from getting both chambers of the Texas State Legislature, and with that will signal a very bad end to the Republican Party in Texas, and that's really bad for Republicans. And the thing is, Republicans unfortunately are not realizing this. They are continually promoting very right and very conservative values in Texas, and when they need to be a little bit more moderate, when they need to be a little bit more like the Republican Party in 2012. And obviously, politics have changed since 2012, and a lot of Republican voters are approve of Trump and his kinds of policies. But Texas, if Texas Republicans want to actually win in the future and not be a minority party, then they need to be able to have a more catch-all kind of party where they cater not just to their base but also the moderate bases in Williamson or in Tarrant or in Hayes or even in Fort Bend County. So that's what's happening in Texas. Texas, for now, it's going to be Republican territory, and it will still be Republican territory because of the gerrymandering that's happening in Texas, in addition to all the laws that Texas Republicans are putting or enacting. But Democrats are definitely going to make gains, and this is definitely going to be a battleground state in future elections to come. So that's the end of this video. Hope you enjoyed it. This video is now adjourned, and I'll see you in the next one.